Hi and welcome to SQE Success, your pathway to becoming an English solicitor. In this video, we'll look at 3 questions in relation to consideration and promissory estoppel, which falls under contract law in FLK 1. Let's dive in. Here's the first question we tackle today. A student is hired for summer work at a bed and breakfast. The student agrees to a payment of £2,000 for the 3-month duration of the busy season. On the student's last day of work, the employer pays the agreed £2,000 and then informs the student that they will arrange for an additional bonus of £500 due to the student's exceptional hard work. However, the following day, the employer realizes that they had overestimated the summer income and such a generous bonus is not feasible. Can the student legally enforce the promise of the bonus? A. Yes, as it was based on the student's exceptional hard work. B. No, as the promise came after the work had finished. C. Yes, as the bonus was offered by the employer voluntarily. D. No, as the promise was not in writing. E. Yes, due to the principle of promissory estoppel. You can pause the video and think about it. The best answer is B. No, as the promise came after the work had finished. For a promise to be legally enforceable as a contract, it must be supported by consideration, something given in exchange for the promise. Consideration must not be passed, that is, it must be given in return for the promise, not for work already completed. In this case, the promise to pay the £500 bonus was made after the student had already performed all the agreed work. Since there was no new consideration given in exchange for the promise, it is not enforceable as a contractual obligation. This is consistent with a rule in Re McCardle, 1951, where a promise made after performance was held to be unenforceable due to past consideration. Let's look at another question very similar to the first question. Same fact that a student was hired for £2,000 for working for 3 months. By the end of the second month, the employer told the student, "Business has been slower than expected. I'm afraid I won't be able to pay the full £2,000. But if you stay and finish the season, I will pay you £1,000, and we'll consider that full and final payment." The student agreed, stayed for the remainder of the summer, and received £1,000 at the end as promised. 2 weeks later, after learning that the business had actually performed well in the final month, the student asked the employer to pay the original £2,000, claiming that the earlier promise should no longer stand and that promissory estoppel entitled him to enforce the full contract. Can the student succeed? A. Yes, because the original contract price was never properly discharged. B. No, because the employer was under economic pressure when making the new promise. C. No, because promissory estoppel cannot be used to bring a claim. D. Yes, because the promise to accept less lacked consideration. E. No, because the new agreement was not recorded in writing. The best answer is C. No, because promissory estoppel cannot be used to bring a claim. Promissory estoppel is an equitable doctrine that can prevent a party from insisting on their strict legal rights, but only where it would be inequitable to do so, and only if the other party has relied on a clear promise. Importantly, estoppel cannot be used as a sword. That is, it cannot create a new cause of action. It is a defensive doctrine only. In this case, the student accepted a revised payment of £1,000 in full satisfaction. He is now trying to use promissory estoppel to reverse that arrangement and enforce the original contract, despite having relied on and acted on the reduced promise. As established in Coombe v. Coombe, 1951, promissory estoppel cannot be used to initiate a claim, a sword. It can only defend against one, a shield. Here is the third tricky question. Same fact that a student was hired for £2,000 for working for 3 months. Toward the end of the second month, the employer informed the student that the third month would be extremely busy due to full bookings. The employer verbally promised to pay an additional £500 bonus and asked the student to work especially hard during the final month. The student agreed, motivated by the prospect of extra pay. However, during the third month, half of the bookings were cancelled, and the workload remained within the normal range. At the end of the season, the employer paid only the originally agreed £2,000, explaining that the bonus was no longer payable as the expected increase in workload never occurred. The student also agreed no significant extra work in the third month. Does the student have any legal ground to claim the £500 bonus from the employer? A. Yes, because the promise of a bonus created a binding variation. B. No, because the student gave no consideration beyond his existing duties. C. Yes, because the student relied on the promise to work the final month. D. No, because a conditional promise is not enforceable unless the condition is met. E. No, because the student did not perform any extra work and therefore gave no new consideration. The best answer is E. No, because the student did not perform any extra work and therefore gave no new consideration. In contract law, for a promise, like a bonus, to be enforceable, it must be supported by consideration, something of value provided in exchange for the promise. Promising to do what one is already contractually obliged to do, i.e., normal duties, does not amount to valid consideration. In this case, the employer's promise of a £500 bonus was conditioned on the student working especially hard during a period of high demand. However, due to cancellations, the student acknowledged that he did not perform any additional work beyond his normal duties. Since no extra performance was given in exchange for the bonus, there was no fresh consideration to support the variation. As such, the student cannot legally enforce the promise. This aligns with the general rule in Stilk v. Myrick, 1809, where doing no more than one's existing contractual duty is insufficient to support a new promise. This table outlines 3 cases illustrating fundamental principles of contract law, particularly regarding consideration and promissory estoppel. In the first case, the employer promised to pay a £500 bonus after the student had already completed all the agreed work. The issue was whether this later promise could be enforced. Under the principle of past consideration is no consideration, a promise made after performance, without anything new in return, is not legally binding. This aligns with Re McCardle, 1951. Thus, the student had no legal right to claim the bonus. In the second case, the student accepted a reduced payment of £1,000 in full satisfaction of the original amount, but later tried to reclaim the full amount by invoking promissory estoppel. Based on Coombe v. Coombe, 1951, promissory estoppel is a shield, not a sword. It can only be used defensively, not to found a new claim. As a result, the student could not use estoppel to enforce the original contract amount. In the third case, the employer promised a bonus if the student worked especially hard during a busy period. However, due to unexpected cancellations, the student performed only his normal duties. The legal issue was whether this qualified as fresh consideration for the bonus. Applying the rule in Stilk v. Myrick, 1809, performing only existing contractual obligations is insufficient to support a new promise. Therefore, the student could not legally enforce the bonus payment. Have you noticed how a slight change in facts, such as the timing and the condition of a new offer, can lead to a completely different legal outcome? That's exactly the skill the SQE tests, and mastering it is key to exam success. I published books filled with MCQs, each built with 3 variations of a legal scenario to sharpen your analysis and deepen your understanding. It is a must-read to pass SQE 1. Turn your ambition into qualification. Begin your SQE journey to become an English solicitor.